Hello and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. In Conversation With is a series by CASI New York where we invite senior management professionals in search of executable advice. Today's session is very interesting. We have multiple people, multiple countries, sustainability, CSR, and ground level execution of CSR. So I look forward to today's session. My name is Paresh. I represent CASI New York as a member of the board of directors. CASI is the world's largest platform for sustainability professionals. We have a presence in 52 countries. We also run the world's largest volunteering platform with a reach of over 3 million volunteers. So welcome to the seminar, everyone. Thank you very much for being here with us. Now, before we go on to the first speaker of the day, I have a general question. Any one of you can answer it. I would be happy. I would request you to give us a 30-40 second, 1 minute answer, a short answer. It's a very general question. So here goes the question. We hear a lot of talk about CSR, sustainability, ground level execution, NGOs, the whole shebang. So a lot of things are being done by a lot of people, and everybody has their own angle. So my question is, what are we really trying to achieve? What are we trying to do? Or is it just another job function, like in operations or administration? Just checking if all the lights are working and the electricity is on, or the laptops are working. Is it just a function? Are we trying to achieve something here? Where are we moving to? What are we really trying to do? Anyone, please.
Shall I start?
Please,
Yeah.
Prabodh.
Thank you, Professor Seth. Sustainability for me is a over-enlarging umbrella, but I called in this professional to give a short answer, is that we are on a mission, and our mission is to make the world a better place to live for all the stakeholders of the earth. And that mission, while building that mission, because we are in the business, we have to ensure that the business is also sustainable. What I believe is that a sustainable planet can support sustainable business, and sustainable businesses will strive or enhance in a sustainable world. As far as we as a professional, we have to ensure that all the stakeholders are well satisfied to the need. And we manage the business in a way that we all thrive.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question. Again, anyone can answer. I would request a short answer before we go on to one of the speakers. Out of ESG, as I understand, so CSR, sustainability, impact, everything leads to ESG in the final cauldron. So in ESG, why do we give so much importance to the E, the climate change? I can name at least 10 countries where even today you cannot give same wages to a lady that you give to a man. So if you give to the I can name such 10 countries. If you give $1 an hour to a boy, then you have to give less than $1 an hour to a girl. Otherwise, people will come and burn your factory. You cannot give similar wages to a lady that you can give to a man, and there are countries like that today. So why is that not on top of top of the ESG ladder? Why is environment on the top? Because if we have 1 billion people to feed, then maybe environment cannot be on the top, and maybe education for all or food for all should be on the top. So what is your opinion on this?
I would disagree with your statement that E on the top on ESG. Number one is that the first thing what we look at ESG is a risk management tool rather than an issue of sustainability, because sustainability encompasses much more canvas than ESG. Now, whether E is important or S is important or G is important, or which part of E, as you stated, climate change is one of the part which I'll talk about that, what is happening in steel sector. What is that important? That is where is the concept of materiality comes in. Now, for one set of business, E might be important. Out of that, it might be climate change is important. For other set of companies or operations or business or type of organizations you are running, your material issue might be inequality. Your material issue could be labor welfare, human rights, biodiversity. So the canvas is very large. It is depends on what is material for an organization or for a group of people or for I as a person will differ, and therefore we need to focus on those important issues because we have to prioritize.
Correct, correct. Thank you very much, Prabhadaji, for that answer. Let's go on to the first speaker of the day. Kyle, would you be kind enough to show us your presentation, sir?
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Let me know if this works. It should. I'll get my presentation into presentation mode, slideshow mode. All right, look good? So really happy to be here. Really exciting. What a great representation of backgrounds and regions and perspectives. And I think, Paresh, that was a great question and two great answers to get us started. So won't spend too much time, obviously 7 or 8 minutes on here to give you a quick introduction to Manulife, and then also talk about how we are seeing these issues, some of the things we're up to, which hopefully will give you enough of a flavor of my perspective, our perspective, and lead to some good dialogue after. Really quickly, won't go through all this. Apologies if it's a little tricky to see, but just quick background on Manulife. And this is a slightly dated, so these numbers have changed a bit, but we are a global financial services company, operations in North America and Asia, also in South America and Europe. We do have some strong partnerships in India as well. Now we probably have 37,000 or so employees globally. A lot of people know us as a global life insurer. We're also one of the top 25 wealth and asset managers, retirement planning. In some ways, CSR and sustainability for us is akin to how how financial services firms think about the issues, whether it's the E, the S, or the G. But there are also some unique things about our business that I'll talk about in the next slide. So ESG, I think it's interesting, Prabodha, what you had said, because I agree, and hopefully we can talk more about this later, that ESG is not synonymous with sustainability. I'm not going to go into that now, but I agree wholeheartedly that ESG is more of a risk management measurement tool, which absolutely has flaws in and of itself, but sustainability is much more. Nonetheless, for us, and sort of how we're viewed from kind of the stakeholder perspective, we're a public company, how investors look at ESG in terms of Manulife. It's everything from kind of how you would think about it, climate change, how strong is our governance, what are we doing about diversity, gender, pay equity, financial inclusion, sort of all of these things in the world of ESG. A couple of things are unique to us as a financial services company that you might not think about. We are a significant holder of real estate globally, around 80 million square feet, and we own and operate the majority of those buildings. So obviously we have our own operations, but we also are operating buildings on behalf of third-party investors and the tenants in those buildings. And so climate change, human health, kind of the built environment are really critical to our work in sustainability and ESG. We're also a significant owner and operator of timber and farmland. And so again, you wouldn't think of a financial services company doing this, but we own we are the largest provider of third-party investment grade farmland. So increasingly investors are looking at agriculture as a long-term stable investment, same with timber. So that brings in a different set of E and S when you think about workers and workers' rights and pay and all of that, but then also things like biodiversity and water, where a more traditional financial services company might be less sort of concerned with those things. Again, apology that the writing is a bit small here. but I think just to touch on a couple of things here where I am seeing, and we are seeing some shifts in ESG or some shifts in sustainability from kind of how they were traditionally viewed to how they are now. I think something I'd like to talk more about later, I don't know if you can see this, it says type of change. I think largely in the world, in the private sector, largely the approaches to sustainability and ESG have been really about doing less bad and sort of incremental changes that on one hand are positive because things are improving a bit. But if you look through the lens of the planet, if you look through the lens of society, it's really not enough. And so I think there is a shift happening, not as quickly as it should be, but a shift happening to looking at corporate, private sector sustainability performance, not just through sort of a lens of how Manulife is doing versus one of its peers, but really looking at the actual impact on the planet. And so a lot of you may have heard of something called the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is really around getting companies to set targets and achieve those targets around what science is telling us we need to do to avoid catastrophic climate change. I think oftentimes, and this was an interesting question about what this role is in terms of my role within an organization. I think it used to be much more siloed, whereas a company would bring in someone and say, okay, here's Kyle, who has to kind of manage all of sustainability across the company. It's just becoming much more integrated, where even at Manulife, it's certainly not perfect, but we have sustainability professionals in all key parts of our business. And of course, the trick is, how do we sort of row in the same direction? How do we accomplish everything collectively versus having a siloed approach to sustainability that sort of sits in an office somewhere and struggles to make change. So I want to focus in on climate change, recognizing that the social issues are important also, but I also do believe climate change touches virtually all of the social issues as well, whether it's income inequality or health or any of the things that climate change really, even biodiversity on the environmental side. There's a lot of connections there, which makes it a hard issue to solve, but one that's really important for all companies to focus on. So I think you all know here that there's sort of the risks associated with climate change, whether that's impact, kind of the physical risk to buildings, to infrastructure, flooding, hurricanes, tsunami, monsoons, all of the things like that. But then also, obviously, there's impacts on biodiversity. There's impacts, again, like I said, on health. There's impacts on kind of how it will affect potential regulatory changes, which is, for business can be a risk. Long way of saying, I think there's a pretty uniform agreement, perhaps not at the policy level in the United States, but a kind of a uniform agreement within industries, within industry associations, certainly within civil society, that we are already feeling the impacts of climate, and there's a real urgency to how we all need to start addressing it much more rapidly. So more specific to us, and this is sort of more, again, looking at the more traditional sides of our business. I mentioned we're a large life insurer. So what are the connections between climate change and morbidity and mortality? What role do we need to play as an insurer, not just to mitigate our own risk, but to think about opportunities where we can help in the mitigation and adaptation strategies, so that as a business we're protected, but our policyholders are protected and have healthier lives also. The big focus, not surprisingly, on financial institutions is around kind of where our dollars are going. And so stranded assets, a lot of talk about fossil fuels, utilities, coal, oil and gas companies. Life insurers traditionally are fairly heavily invested in industries like utilities, because they have traditionally long time horizons in terms of those investments that match our policyholder time horizon. So if someone's on our insurance for 50 years, in theory, you want to be investing their policy dollars in a very stable long-term investment, which traditionally fossil fuels and utilities and other industries like that made sense. But in terms of climate, they may not be the case. Obviously, kind of credit risk and how we are viewed from organizations like Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and investors in our companies based on what we're doing. And then, obviously the asset management side, thinking about timber and ag, for example, kind of how climate change might be impacting those industries. And there's just and then there's even things, there's a strong connection between what's happening with biodiversity and climate change and things like pandemics that we're all experiencing. As a major holder of commercial real estate buildings, there's been a lot of changes in thinking about, okay, like how are cities thinking about people in their buildings, and sort of as a property owner, there's certainly changes underfoot. But there's not just downsides. Obviously, there are opportunities as well, as there's the tradition to the low carbon economy. We're a significant investor in renewable energy and energy efficiency. I think about we have about 30, let me get this not quite right, maybe 34 billion in green investments currently across a range of opportunities. Again, thinking about from the insurance perspective, what are the potential products or product changes we can make that take into account a changing climate, that also are benefit the members and policyholders of our insurance, but then also the business as well. And so certainly risk is important and risk mitigation is important, but it's equally important to think about, okay, based on what we do, how can we actually provide solutions? I mentioned the timber business. We're about to launch our first product that is really focused on kind of climate change versus just the pure returns on a timber investment. So there's natural capital opportunities. So we're thinking hard about kind of all of those things. And then finally, this is likely too small for most people to see, but we recently, like many have seen, probably commitments both at the country level, but then also at the company level around sort of net zero emissions by 2050, and sort of what does that mean? And so these were our first set of public climate change commitments, and we think they're good. I mean, they're not sort of bleeding edge, but they are, we're thinking about our own operations and reducing emissions, thinking about what we can do to transition our investment portfolio to net zero by 2050, and how do we act on that much sooner. But then again, how do we think about these connections between climate and biodiversity and the different elements of our business to figure out how we can play a larger role. So I'm going to stop there, but again, eager to sort of get into some of the finer nuances of ESG and sustainability. My past life prior to being at Manulife and a company before that was in the NGO advocacy world at an organization called Oxfam, an environmental defense fund. So I like to think that I'm still an advocate, maybe an advocate in sheep's clothing, operating inside a company to try to get us to do the right thing, but it's not always easy. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Kyle. There was a lot. That was a lot to digest at one go. I have a few questions on the 39 billion that you guys have invested in green assets. But let's keep the questions at the end. I'm sure Sandeep ji and Prabodha ji also have questions for you. So let's move on to Prabodha ji. Prabodha ji, are you there?
Yeah. Thank you.
Prabodha ji, would you like to share a presentation, please?
All right. Just give me a second. I think it's visible now.
Yes, now it is.
Okay. Good. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on the part of the world you are listening. First of all, thank you, Professor Forrest Said and Dr. Mitesh Said, for inviting me to speak in this knowledge series. And in this series, I intend to provide you with an overview and a way forward on the decarbonization strategy of steel sector. Well, why I'm going to talk about decarbonizations and climate change, I think partly Kyle has touched that World Economic Forum's risks report, how consistently from last couple of years or 4 or 5 years, the climate change is becoming one of the biggest risks for the organizations. And steel being in hard to abate sector is something we really need to be concerned about how to decarbonize that part. So let me first give you a brief about the steel process and why it is important. Now, if you look at steel's key two components are iron, that is one of the Earth's most abundant elements, and recycled steel. So the primary steel production process, which uses a blast furnace and a basic oxygen furnace, which is normally called BF and BOF, is the most common, and that accounts nearly 70% of total steel production in the world now. So steel also can be made using an electric arc furnace that you can use DRI and scrap, and that is around 29% of steel production currently happening in the world. Beauty of steel is that once steel is produced, it becomes a permanently available resource because it is 100% recyclable and has a potentially infinite life cycle. So if you look at from a life cycle perspective, this is a wonderful material. This infinite recyclability and without any loss of properties, combined with its strength, its versatility, availability and affordability, makes this material as a unique material, and any civilization's progress of a country depends on availability of steel. And there are thousands of different types of steel designed to meet the specific need of end user. Many of the products, what you see today, were developed over past 10 years. And the variety of steel is not only defined by its chemical composition, but also by a variety of microstructure on a very nano and sub-nano scale. So this leads to an impressive range of achievable properties and ensures that there is much scope to continue developing new, innovative, lightweight and high strength steel. And that is what my previous speaker talks about, the opportunity. And this is where we see an opportunity for the steel. Steel is critical to the sector and technologies that will enable to drive a green economy. You talk about renewable energy, resource and energy efficiency building, low carbon transport sector, infrastructure for fuel efficient and clean energy vehicles, and recycling facilities. You name it, all depends on steel. But at the same time, even heavy industries, the iron and steel sector ranks first when it comes to carbon dioxide emissions, and second when it comes to energy consumption. Even the steel industry has reduced its energy consumptions almost 60% since 1960 till date. So there a lot has been done, but then what we need to do? Let me also give some perspective of what's happening in India. As you know, in India is currently the second largest steel producing country in the world after China. The National Steel Policy 2017, which we call NSP 2017, has set a target to increase the Indian steel production capacity to almost 300 million ton per year by 2030, that is end of the decade, and at the same time to increase the per capita consumption to 160. Just to give a comparison, average global per capita consumptions today is around 250 kg. So India has a lot to catch it up. That means India would remain the fastest growing producer of steel. This will be due to demand growth and the expected contraction of steel production in China. And you see that is happening in Europe. The iron and steel sector, if you look at, is responsible around 23% of total industrial energy consumption in India. That with coal accounting almost 85% of total energy input. So we are still heavily dependent on coal. So as a result, this sector is highly emission intensive, contributing almost 1/3 of direct industrial CO2 emissions, which is around 252 million ton during last year, or 10% of the total energy system emissions in India. So that's quite large. But having said that, looking at its impact, both positive and negative, what are the mitigations and technological improvement options available? So like any wider energy system, if you look at iron and steel sector, also cannot rely on one single technology or any one mitigation lever alone to make the progress on the climate goals. So it must pull all levers that can make a difference for its transition to zero emissions to take place as quickly as possible. Being a hard to avoid sector, you need to understand that transitions in steel sector to near zero is going to take a long time. So what should be the short term? In the short term, the largest role is going to be played by the technology performance improvement within the current conventional route and a demand reduction through material efficiency. That means use the best available technology, fullest possible, and get maximum efficiency. But if you look at medium to long term, that means from 2030 to say 2050, carbon capture, utilization and storage with a fuel shift that is away from coal towards reductions through natural gas or hydrogen or bioenergy is going to play a big role in this sector. So when examining emissions reduction, cumulative during 2020 to 2050, if you see, the largest role are played by material efficiency, technology performance improvement, and carbon capture and utilizations. So any reduction process changes through hydrogen is going to happen possibly after 2050. So in a near term, it is crucial to maximize the operational efficiency in existing asset and to minimize additional emissions from new infrastructure by investing in best available technologies. So two examples I'll tell about the best available technology, which is called coke dry quenching and top pressure recovery turbines, which is basically waste heat recovery systems. And right now we have around 30% penetration in India. That should go up to 70% in a sustainable development scenario by 2030. That means if this sector has to hit 2-degree scenario by 2070. So in longer term, emission reductions are very hard to win, with the need for a rapid rollout of very innovative near zero emission technologies, steel making technology. So if you look at innovative retrofit concept are to be deployed to tackle the existing blast furnace stock, which are very young, specifically in India. And this is long gestation period. When you invest in a blast furnace, its lifetime becomes 40 years. So the new blast furnace which are being constructed right now will have a real challenge. So in the latter half of the sustainable development scenario, the hydrogen-based DRI and innovative smelting reductions coupled with carbon capture and storage route are to be take more role. So by 2050, we can say near zero emission routes will likely account for more than 50%, that is 55% of the production route. So looking at all these options, this is my kind of pillars, what we call identified and recommend, that these 5 pillars will possibly help the steel industries to make sustainable steel. And those are first and foremost that you have to have a proper sustainability framework and priorities. That's important, prioritization the organizations. Then the focus on material efficiency and energy efficiency in the near term horizon, what I discussed, because that's going to play a major role. The most important next is the supply chain. You focus on supply chain because we normally tend as a business, as an organization, to focus within our boundary. But we need to look at the life cycle perspective and see what impact it causes in the entire life cycle of the product. Not only looking at what it plays with your production processes and that lifetime. And clearly focus building circular economy, because a lot of waste coming out of steel industries becomes an input. For example, BF slag, which comes out of blast furnace, become a raw material to replace clinker in cement sector, which is another hard to abate sector, and that replaces and reduces carbon emissions from other sector. So focus on building circular economy. There are a lot of examples available. And lastly, keep on doing R&D activity to have those innovative steel making technology, because fundamentally, after all, instead of carbon reductions, we have to have a cleaner reductant, and hydrogen is the most suitable candidate for it. But when it will be feasible commercially, that is time will come. So this is what I will suggest, that the steel industry need to focus in the path to decarbonization and contribute to climate change mitigations. So with that, I'll remain, because I will not go into detail of what JSW is doing. If somebody is interested, you can reach me to find out how we are aligning our approach towards this philosophy, what I talked about, and what is likely feasible. And with that, I will remain for any further discussions. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about decarbonization strategy in steel sector. I remain here.
Thank you, Prabodhaji, for that extremely well-made presentation. This is probably the first time I have seen such detailing on how the steel industry is working on carbon and sustainability. So I have two questions really. Before we go on to Sandeep Kumar, we have a lot of questions. So Patrick and I are close friends, and we usually discuss the pros and the cons. So one question is, see, I was talking to somebody in Delhi at the Science and Environment Center. Yeah, so they usually do a lot of research on the steel industry. Now they have come out with a report saying the steel industry is growing at a phenomenal rate, and so it's a fit case for environmental scrutiny because it is resource intensive and highly polluting. So my quick question was that there are so many large players, very powerful players in the steel industry, and steel is the background to the country's economy. You cannot do away with steel. As a country, you need them. Yeah. So are steel players always under a lot of pressure from activists, ESG propaganda people? Is the steel industry always under a lot of pressure from the environmentalist and the activist?
I completely agree with you, Professor. Said that you rightly told steel is energy intensive, resource intensive, capital intensive, having high life cycle. Correct. So none are to our benefits. At the same time, you rightly told, no civilizations can grow without the contribution of steel, and that is why we need to look at steel from a life cycle perspective. And I gave example how it is going to contribute to the climate change mitigations. But nevertheless, answer to your question is yes. Steel industry is such an industry. I call it a mother of all industry, because if you look at an integrated iron and steel facility, you name a industrial process, you will find that there. So therefore, naturally we'll be under pressure, but we have to manage those. We have to make steel clean. We have to make steel in a process that the positives outweigh the negatives. But all steel industry will be always on constant pressure. That is one of the reasons this sector is also called hard to abate sector. Because it is difficult. Correct. Climate change parlance, why it is called hard to abate? Because this is not about energy transition, it is about technology transition, because the reduction process gives the carbon additions. So lot of R&D has to be done. So steel industry, I think it is in the forefront. They are taking this is head on, and steel industry is contributing to sustainability in many fronts. You talk about S part. I think this is one of the industry which is contributing to the social sector, both outside of its factory and inside in a great way. So steel industry is necessary material for everybody. The challenge is that how do we manage those associated negative impact? I call it that any activity you do, it will have negative impacts. No activity in the world you can find has only positive impact and no negative impact. Its question is that how do we manage that? How we convert those risks to opportunities? And there will be a challenge. I understand, and I am always within under the scrutiny, and that is the reason. First thing, from JSW perspective, we want to be transparent with our stakeholder. We admit that we make impact, but we also want to show you that we are taking care of the impact responsibly, and we are open to suggestions and support from anybody.
Absolutely, sir. My follow-up question, I have a follow-up question, but before that, Patrick, a side note to you. When we are working on those ESG reports, we need to make a separate kind of something for the steel industry, so that it is not about polluting today. It is about how they are improving on the processes and contributing. And we need to take the life cycle, and not only today's production, as Prabodhadi mentioned. So that was a note between you and me, Patrick. Yeah. Yeah. So my follow-up question, or rather, it's not a question, Prabodhaji, it's a comment. See, what happens is, and again, the team at CASI, we keep on discussing this, and what happens is we always blame the oil and gas sector, saying these are the evil people. And Patrick is a huge, he really promotes this school of thought, that if we were to always keep on blaming the oil and gas sector, saying they are pollutants, but the IT sector, which is supposed to be the cleanest sector, is the biggest user of oil and gas. Yeah. So you cannot put all the blame on oil and gas manufacturers. A part of the blame has to shift on the users, because you are using it and so they are making it. So something like that is also applicable for steel, because if we are using such a lot of steel, and if we don't have a choice but to use steel, then steel companies are not to blame really. The blame has to be shared equally, and the onus lies equally on the users, to so many things like reuse or recycle, or whichever way it works for them. But the onus lies on the users as well, and not only on the manufacturers. So I thought I'll make this comment to you, because this was a heated argument between the CASI team yesterday, and Patrick was leading that discussion.
No, I agree in the sense that we should not blame any sector. We all are responsible. See, we are also a consumer. We are also not producer. A lot of customers are now putting pressure that you produce things in a cleaner way, in a better way. So it has to be a collaboration. I am a great believer of collaboration. So collaboration not only has to happen between industry body and the technology provider. It has to happen with this stakeholder in larger stakeholder context. So that dialogue has to happen, and that collaboration has to happen, and we need to improve. Our ultimate objective is to make the world sustainable. And in the same process, we want to build a sustainable business, because we don't build sustainable business, we will perish. See, any organization doesn't understand that, whatever sector he may be, you can't, many people tell renewable energy is a clean sector. But we understand there are a lot of social issues when you put windmills. There are a lot of waste management issues when you put, the solar cells. So no sector is clean or no sector is dirty. Some sector has inherently process that have higher or larger impacts. The question is that how we are working to minimize those, mitigate those, and look at life cycle perspective. The total net gain should be benefit to the society, to the mankind, to the mother earth. So that should be everybody's objective.
Absolutely, sir. Let's move on to Sandeep Kumar ji. Before after Sandeep Kumar, we'll go back to Kyle and ask him questions on life cycle about those $39 billion of investments. What do they look at the life cycle? But let's have Sandeep Kumar's presentation. Sandeep ji, over to you, please.
Okay. sorry, I'm not making a presentation because you know I'm referring to this particular organization where I'm working currently.
Okay.
I've just been there for 1.5 months, so it's very little time to have a lot of things. But going by my experience of working in CSR for more than now 25 years with topmost companies like Tata Motors, I've worked with the Reliance, worked with Crompton Greaves. So similarly, as Kyle was saying, in my first avatar, I was working with the NGO called ActionAid, and we have a different perspective altogether on that front. So I bring with me both these ends together, and I'll try and share my perspective on working on the ground on the key issues which is burning around sustainability aspects. Uh, to me, looks like it's a triangle approach which has to be followed. One side you have Mother Earth, another side you have people, and the third side is the process or the users. And so all these things, when it works in conjunction in more balanced way, the things becomes better. And as a human, we have a tendency to become better and make things better for future. That's what is the keynote meaning related with sustainability. I'll still like to share with you guys something on this, which I have. And I've just written before this session was started, and I like to read for you. What do I mean by this? So basically, it's an environment in which all of us are living, and there are human beings, there is an ecosystem, there is an animal life, and the water cycle. These are the four main pillars of overall environment, and their interconnectedness in a balanced way is something close to be referred as sustainability. That's what I understand it. Also, it's very important that for sustainability is important for a very simple and very straightforward reason. We cannot maintain our quality of life as human beings, the diversity of life on Earth's ecosystem, unless we embrace it. It's like this, that it's all part of a life. We have to look at it from more connecting angle. It is related to our thoughts, it is related to our practices, and it is related to our usages. So, and time has come to understand this. We will damage anything beyond repair with either our thoughts or uses and practices. So change becomes very important. And the root of that change lies in understanding and striving for sustainability in our own homes, in our communities, in our ecosystem, and around the world. This is what largely means to me. Coming back to the organization where I work, it's called Indocount Industries Limited. It's into textile business, and perhaps many of you in US might be knowing, because we are one of the largest exporter of cotton, particularly in bed and linen segment. And the best part of this organization is that we work with cotton only grown organically. That's our USP. It's 100% organic cotton that we work on. And I'm trying to get into details of all these. I do not have much experience because I could not go into field because of the COVID restrictions and all. But certainly the processes are there in place, which is creating kind of taking farmers along in the whole process itself. So the whole process starts from the farmer side when they make those cotton using organic approach or green approach. And from there it comes to our factory. The factory also uses a lot of focused sustainability parameters in the whole process. And the company is also reporting on Higgs index largely. I do not have much understanding of that, but then I've come to know that there is a Higgs index, and on that index the company has been reporting, and there is a huge market for it. And the best part about all these things is that the end of customer, which is there on the other side of the globe, is also connected with the latter side of the globe, which is the farmer, through a process which is being done by our company. I think this is the interconnectedness, which is very important. We have to understand this in larger context of sustainability. This is primarily, I'll not like to talk about what we have been doing in CSR, because largely it is focused as of now on COVID and COVID care. People are dying because of not having those, oxygen and oxygen-related instrument. And so the first point of my contract was to develop those, areas where we can support people so that they can live. And so we provided all those support to different hospitals and the medical fraternity to take care of large number of people who are facing this difficulty in this difficult time. And apart from that, the organization is largely into education space, and they're kind of covering around 100 odd villages and working on education with the school students and on their health intervention. There is a health intervention on that. And I'm trying to bring a kind of sustainability angle with these students, as we have more than 50,000 students directly linked with us through the program. And so we'll be building on that base going forward. But I'd like to share some of the experiences of past, because I've worked for more number of years in Tata's, and they are known for delivering very good results on various parameters of sustainability. And in fact, they coined the term CSR basically came from their own experience, and this is an experience of 150 years back, where they started to build roads and community infrastructure in a place called Jamshedpur, when they started their first steel plant there. And it started from there, and then gradually it has grown into various businesses. And so Jamshedpur still holds a very key pinnacle point of the concepts which has been built around CSR and sustainability. And it is more so with a very courageous belief that we have to take care of society in which we operate. And this is a basic belief on which Tatas have been investing a lot of money and their time and energy in building the capacities of people and the environment around. And so if that becomes better, the communication becomes better between the two stakeholders, and that what makes a business grow much better on a faster scale. So there is a connectivity which is very important, and that has been done very well by establishing different CSR projects for last more than 100 years. And I remember very well on a wasteland, which is almost supposed to be a dead land, we planted some more than 5 lakh trees, and we took care of it properly. In a 3-year time, the forest had grown up there. And on a wasteland, which is a dead land, I have seen myself jackals moving around. I've seen biodiversity getting richer, just because you have created something which is more natural and more adaptable to the local situation. Things improve. So nature has its own way of adopting the things. Like we adopt from nature, the nature also adopts from us. Only point is that one has to give time, one has to be careful about what we do and how we do, and keep supporting that. Things will improve over a period of time. It has brought in a lot of changes there. Similarly, water is a key element, and the more we withdraw water from underground sources, the more we are getting into trouble zone. We are going to face a major difficulty. All of us, we know that it's going to be a big problem area in coming years. And so water is something which is natural, and it has to be conserved naturally in its own way. Now, thankfully, we have a lot of abundant rainfalls in different parts of the globe. If we don't do those conservation techniques on the ground, make it work with the people, so that large number of those things are created and people take it directly on their own, and they also get involved in it. It becomes necessary for all of us to get involved in process conservation of water. That's where we have a bigger role to play. So if we look at these two angles of sustainability, water and tree, this becomes the key pillars of everything that we are talking around sustainability, because these are the key resource that we take out from a natural setup. Earth was not given to us in such a way. We have used it for our own purposes, and we have to, rewind the whole thing, give it back, develop it, and conserve it, so that the future also gets into a better place, and future generation can take the similar thing. So my one point that I want to bring to this August gathering is, we have to invest in the next generation, about educating them on all these aspects. The next generation has to be called Generation G, not XYZ. Those days are over. The next generation is more, inclined towards the green approach, and so they should be called as Generation G. They are going to take up the whole lead, because we already have a lot of things written under various SDG goals, and the way the population is increasing across the globe, we have to keep building the base for taking care of nature in a better way. This is what
Thank you very
I
much,
like.
Sandeep ji, for the talk. I have a question. See,
Yes.
what happens is, um, CSR and sustainability. When we started CSR and Sustainability Institute in New York, back then, over a decade back, it was called CSR and Sustainability Institute. Now we just call it CASI New York. It was basically so that to promote that sustainability activities should mitigate risks, enhance reputation, and contribute to your business results. Regardless of the business that you are in, and
Right.
that is how sustainability or CSR should contribute.
Right.
But now increasingly we find that CSR has become a business silo.
Mhm.
It has become a silo within the company.
Mhm.
So once it has become a silo within a company, it has its own pressures to perform,
Mhm.
and it has become like a business division.
Right.
Now, what is happening is, originally the intention of supporting the business, supporting the environment of the business or the people that you serve, the communities you serve. And by communities you serve, I mean, you may be selling to them, you may be serving them, you may be situated or located around them. They were the communities that you serve. That was the original purpose. Now, more and more, what is happening is, a company in manufacturing or a company in service industry would suddenly take up a school 5,000 kilometers away and run a school, and then the CSR business, the CSR division, because it has become a silo,
Mhm.
comes out with a report saying we taught 5,000 students in Kerala, and the company would be located in Punjab. So how does it serve the communities that you are serving?
Right.
It really goes away. And now there is a competition between CSR managers or foundations. We are training this many students, or we are doing this many people. They're doing good. They're doing good. I am not questioning the good. I'm questioning the fact that if this was the rail track, then CSR as a track was there to support the primary track of doing business. So CSR has to revolve around the communities you serve necessarily. Now, if you are an engineering giant, and you do a lot of business in Punjab, and suddenly you adopt a school in Kerala, how does it make business sense? It only makes sense if CSR is a silo. So you are getting $2 million, and then you spend $2 million, and which is the best way to spend $2 million. So this is the best way to spend $2 million. But the original question was not finding the best way to spend your CSR budget. The
Right.
original question was, how does this CSR activity or sustainability activity support the business that we are in? But now more and more these tracks are moving apart, and
Mhm.
CSR as a division has a mind on its own. You know, it is
Right.
doing something which is not connected to the core business.
Right.
So, any comments on this?
Yes,
Any
yes, yes.
comments
Well,
from you,
yes,
Kyle,
yes, definitely, definitely.
Prabodhaji, anyone? What
Yeah.
are your
So,
comments, sir?
yeah, I'll talk first about it. The experience tells me that within the framework, a different framework which is coming as a pressure to the CSR sector, because many other sectors are also growing. So people want to grow further CSR also.
Hmm.
Then the legal framework itself talks about you have a different approach, and in order to those requirements also you have to increase your scope of work. Now, for example, I'll tell you, 2% for a huge company can be 1,000 crores,
Correct.
and 1,000 crores cannot be done in a small way, small place. It has to go beyond boundaries. So new boundaries are being scaled up. Third is you have different stakeholder approach. Now, as a stakeholder to the business, you identify different people or at different realm of time. Now, in order to influence them, in order to have a better relationship with them, you try and increase the scope of work further. So that again increases the boundary, further. So in a way, it is also evolving actually, and in fact, it has evolved very well in last say 10 years, and so a variety of things are coming up into the frame. Thankfully, we have a very good system in our country where we have we have a CSR Act where mandatorily everyone has to work on this, and this is all with the approach that it's going to create some good models, because CSR per se can work on developing some model. It cannot be a substitute to the government, because the basic services has to be provided by the government. And so model creation is the main approach which has been taken up. And so in developing those models, the people are also reaching out to different places where they find their thought process are matching, and things are in favor of doing such program. So that's how CSR is being taken forward.
Mhm. My
It's a
question to you, Kyle.
multi-stakeholder. It's a
Yeah,
multi-stakeholder
I
approach.
have a similar question for Kyle. Kyle, my question is, how does a large giant like your company ensure that the CSR strategy remains in line with the core business strategy? Because it is very easy to go astray. Adopt a village here, adopt some people there, go into animal shelters. It's very easy to go all around the place, like a kid in a China store or a gift shop. So how do you ensure that your CSR strategy is completely tied up with the core business strategy? How do you do that?
So I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that as an objective. I think on one hand, I do, in that you're absolutely correct, Paresh, in that you can't be focusing on issues or constituents or stakeholders that are totally irrelevant to the business. So to your point, as a large financial institution, if we said we are going to focus on coral reefs, not that isn't a valid or an issue that needs addressing. It just doesn't make sense based on what we do. And so I think you do have to ensure that your approach, your tactics, your initiatives, your issues are the business sees the connection, or else, to your point, they'll always operate separately. That being said, I think that the days of always showing the business benefit to any sustainability or CSR related initiative, what's the business benefit here? We need to show the business. The days of, okay, we need to talk about sustainability in the language of business. Mm-hmm. Those approaches have failed. I mean, they have completely failed, right? So if you're talking about biodiversity, if you're talking about income inequality, if you're talking about health, if you're talking about climate, whatever the private sector has been doing has been woefully inadequate. That's the reality, correct? And so I think what and this is hard to do, but I think sustainability functions, particularly within CSR functions, particularly within business, really have to try and shift the mindset that, sure, we are not going to sink the ship based on avoiding catastrophic climate change, but we need to start thinking about CSR and sustainability through the lens of the planet, through the lens of society, and not purely through the lens of business. Or else we're going to spin our wheels and nothing we do will make a difference for that generation, that next coming generation that Sandeep is talking about. So I guess short way of saying, I do agree there needs to be a connection, but I would say there is the focus on that connection has been drastically too strong, and what's resulting is across any issue you would like to bring up, whatever the private sector doing is very incrementalist and not enough.
Sure. So I have another question for all of the speakers. Anyone can answer. We work a lot with a lot of foundations. And there are a lot of foundations. We have been actively engaging with JSW also. So Ashwini, Sumandra, all these people, they're close friends. Now, how difficult or easy it is at ground level to collaborate with other companies and foundations? You're doing something, Kyle is doing something in, let's say, Norway or South America or India, for CSR. And JSW is doing something on CSR. And both of you are working for women empowerment or financial literacy. How easy or difficult? Or is it a part of the game? Is it a part of the strategy? Or it is not really a part? Do you go around scouting for partners? How do you do that?
Yes, I'll speak about my experience on this.
Please.
So largely depends on issue to issue actually.
Mhm.
On a certain issue, you'll find if a good partner is there, and certainly if you want to scale up the whole operation and having a similar thought process, then there is always better to go together and develop the scope further, because you'll be able to influence large number of people that is required. So normally it becomes a good partnership deal that way once the issues are in the common sense together on the same issue actually. And but it also happens because again talking about people working in a particular area with a
Mhm.
particular set of mindset,
Mhm.
possibly may not be done in the same way in some other place. As the situations are so different, every kilometer you have a change of culture and tradition, and everything happens in a country like India. So it becomes difficult to manage the same thing, same approach to be managed at different places simultaneously. It has to be locally based, because then it is more adoptable, and people are ready to learn and come forward for developing the partnership further. That's one area which is important. But going by again a legal framework, even in the Companies Act, CSR Act, there is a provision made for this. The companies can come together, or the foundation can come together within a CSR and work together on a larger scale of platform.
Mhm. So, have you actually on ground actively scouted for another company as a partner and done an alliance with, or was it not done?
No, it was. Even here in this company where I am currently, we are working with the Wokhard Foundation, which is again a huge foundation, part of Wokhard industry.
Mhm.
So there is a partnership which is there, and we're working together. It's a long-term partnership which has been signed. So it depends on, again, leadership to think about those processes and thinking about the partners, because anyway, if you have a bigger or larger reach, it will certainly going to benefit large number of people. Now that should be clear in the minds of people. If you just want to create an island of development patch somewhere, then it's a different ball game altogether.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. With that, we come to the almost the end of our seminar for today. We have time for one or two questions. Dr. Seema, Hayden, uh, Patrick, any questions? Even the speakers can ask questions to each other.
So if there is no question, can I respond to earlier two questions which you put for the panel?
Oh, yes, please, please.
Yeah. Uh, this is not really a response, but rather a comment I would make. First thing is that when we talk about corporate social responsibility or CSR and sustainability, they're two different things. To me, CSR very clearly, corporate social responsibility is part of bigger sustainability umbrella. Second thing, when we talk about CSR, specifically in India, we link it to the regulatory requirement. But please note that regulatory requirement has come recently. But companies like Tata's, Birla's, JSW, they are doing since before it came. Why they are doing? What is the philosophy? It's basically to empower and for the society. Uh, to meet their own livelihood requirement or any material issues which they are facing. So therefore, any strategy being developed for CSR has to develop cooperatively through a proper stakeholder engagement. And there, the approach of a company in general should be not to go on feeding, rather to empower, to enable the society to achieve the stated objective. If the stated objective is the issue of water scarcity, then the foundation or the CSR arm of the company working in their area should work in such a way that enable them to be self-sufficient. That should be approach. The second part of your question, Professor Seth, was whether there is a symbiotic relations between different foundations and partners. I would see what I have seen. Without any partners, you cannot drive such large-scale social reforms. So it is inevitable. But your second question, third question was very pertinent and very important. That do foundations themselves coordinate between themselves, cooperate, co-opt? Co-opt, I have not seen. Do they cooperate, coordinate? Yes, they do. Like, this forum itself is a platform that we all are speaking to each other and learning from each other. So those kind of things happen. But really co-opt for a collaborations, coming together for a cause, it must be happening when both the organizations are operating in the same area. But I really do not have practical experience, which Ashwin will be able to rightly comment. So I would not take his experience here. But in JSW, we really look forward to collaborations. Be sure about that. And our approach will be enable the society and fulfill those obligations that we grow along with the society. That is our philosophy. And that should be the philosophy of the business. You can't grow in isolations. The society doesn't grow, you will be thrown out as a business today or tomorrow. And that is why the main objective of corporate social responsibility. So this is what I wanted to react to what we discussed.
Thank you very much, Prabodhaji. We have done quite a lot of work. In fact, Ashwini Saxena has been a very strong supporter of CASI from your foundation. We are working with JSW for the last 7, 8, 10 years now, since we started CASI in India. We are aware of the good work that JSW has.
I'm sure you would have known our approach.
Yes, sir, absolutely. You guys are doing a good job. Sandeepji, thank you very much. Before we end, one final question. Kylie, any ending remarks? Kyle, any ending remarks, comments, anything from you, sir?
No, this obviously has been very enlightening and enjoyable. I think that particularly for global organizations, which I think we all are generally on your last question. I think one of the challenges for us is say financial literacy. You mentioned perhaps say that was something that we were which as a financial institution there is that connection obviously. Is how do you strike a balance between, and this is in the context of the partnering and trying to get to more structural change, and how do you strike the balance between a global initiative and approach when the reality is that things look very different on the ground in local markets? And so financial literacy means something different in Boston than it does in Vietnam, than it does in London. And so from that sort of community partnering, I think that it's an interesting, you really have to try to strike that balance where you on one hand, and this is coming out of Oxfam, I learned this very quickly. On one hand, you can't say this is what financial literacy means and this is how we're going to solve all of your problems. And so we're going to try to do the same thing in each one. You really have to rely on understanding stakeholder community concerns, issues, input. And so I think it is this tricky balance of not having it totally decentralized. So you're doing slightly different things everywhere, but at the same time, you are contributing based on what that local community need is.
Correct. I agree with you absolutely. I sit on many boards as an advisor, and there are a couple of funds, AIFs, and a microfinance company who I advise. I advise the board on that. And yes, you are absolutely right. Financial literacy is something that we are working on, and it means very different things for different people. So, while at one hand we are going about doing financial literacy for self-help groups to make them aware that what is the percentage they should be taking money from. And at the Microfinance Institute, we are trying to give loans at 24% per year because currently those people are taking loans at 60% per year. Yeah, interest rates. So now we are trying to help them not take loans at 60% and take loans from our company, the company which I am on the board of, at 24% per year. Yes, I absolutely agree. Financial literacy within the same state can also mean very different things. So for a giant like yours, it can mean very different things when you're looking at Delhi and Boston on the same table. Yeah. So with that, we come to our end of the program. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Praboda ji, Sandeep ji, Kyle. Thank you very much, Patrick, Seema ji, Hayden, Dr. Mitesh. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.
Good
Good night. Good night.